This video is showing how the teacher's self-reflection tool based on the reference framework of competencies of democratic culture is actually working in its preliminary version that is submitted to piloting. It's not addressing the content of the tool, but just the way it functions. The details about what the reflection tool is, what it is about, what are its purposes, and the structure are presented also in the public section of the tool, with some more details available in the about the tool section, which all the users are invited to consult. Then, of course, all interested users are required to register an account, which is a very easy to do process. And then once the account is created, they need to log in order to have access to the content of their account. In here, there are, of course, the three main sections: the part about the reference framework, introduction to the reference framework, the warming up section, and then the thematic modules. For the piloting version, besides the content that is expected to remain of the tool, there are also several elements that are included in order to get feedback from the users about the tool and then improve the tool based on this feedback. The first section includes the description in brief of the reference framework, which is a document, a text that can be read, a brief video about the reference framework developed by the Policy Civic Education Center in Austria, Polis Civic Education Center in Austria. Then the possibility to navigate through the descriptors of competence, which is something that will be used later in the process of each of the modules. So here there is the list of the 20 sections, 20 elements of the model of competencies, and for each there is the list of descriptors categorized as in the second volume of the reference framework. Now, in order to use the other sections of the tool, it's very important to have a clear understanding of the descriptors and the model of competencies. And one way to check if you have the required knowledge is to take the quiz. The quiz is a list of questions that you can take just to check the degree of understanding of some of the elements of the model of competencies and the reference frame. Now, once this is done, users can move on to the warming up session, which is aimed at getting them familiar with the process of observation, reflection, and self-reflection. And the procedure used in the parts of this section of the tool are similar to the ones that will be then also used in the thematic modules to some extent. Let's see how it works here. I'm going to show how this section works. For example, this is very similar to the some part of the thematic modules because it starts with some input, and in this case there is the suggestion to watch a video, and then you have the possibility to include a description of what you understood, and you can actually answer the various questions. And then you have the section that requires you to select competencies and descriptors. So for example, you consider that we need to connect, to analyze this scene in the video from the perspective of these descriptors. So I select 2 descriptors and then I save. Then I want to add some other descriptors, for example, this one and this one. Then I save again. So I can see that I selected descriptors from two competencies in the model. And I can, when I finish the selection, I can check them. I can see the descriptors, and then I am going to save them. And they will appear here in the list under the section referring to the selection of competencies and descriptors. Then I can follow the other questions, save everything. I can add something here, and then once I have answered all the questions, I am going to save this. Now, if I go back, for example, I can log out and log in again, or move to another section, see something, and then I can come back here. I can see all the modifications that I made, the list of descriptors that were selected, the comments, the responses that are saved. So I can add, edit again, and save, or not. If I don't want to save, I can just simply go back and move to another section in the warming up part. The same process is working in the thematic modules. The thematic modules have all a similar structure, consisting of an introductory text, which you are invited to read, which suggests some possible connections of the topic of the module with elements of competence, among other elements, and then continues with one or several scenarios, reflections based on hypothetical scenarios which can be encountered in the classroom or in the school. After the part on reflection on scenarios, there is always for each thematic module a section on practical suggestions on planning and evaluating an educational activities, where you have suggestions to practice some activities with the students, and then guidance to reflect on this experimentation. If we go and try some of the sections on the scenarios, we can see that they function in a very similar way to what we just saw in the warming up section. So you have a text describing the scenario, and then a series of questions where you can put answers. So here I enter my answer, and I can do that. Of course, I have to correct. I can do that with the questions. So I'm going to put this everywhere or in some places for you to see that it's going to be saved. Now, once I started, I got to the section on selecting competency and descriptor. It's a similar procedure like the one that we just have seen for the warming up. Only that in this particular thematic module, there are three options. You can select from the whole list of 20 competencies, or from two suggested restricted lists of 7 or 5 competencies. I'm going to go for the first option. So I'm going to decide myself what are the competencies and the descriptors that are useful for my reflection. Let's say I take one from here, and then I save. I go all the way down to save the descriptors. So I have here one competence from which I selected. I want then to select another couple of descriptors from this competence. And then I want, let's say, one more from this one. So I am going to save again, and I see that I selected descriptors from 3 competencies, which is okay. Then I'm going to check them. If I see that something is not correct, I can go back and select other descriptors, but here I see I'm good. I selected 2 from one competence and 1 from each of 2 others, so it's fine. I'm satisfied with that. I save the descriptors and I can see that they appear here in the list of competencies and descriptors selected. I can answer to the other questions after that. And when I'm done, I, of course, can save this. Now, if I go back, I go, let's say, to read more about the reference framework. Then I come back to this. I think it was this scenario that we looked at. I can see that my answers are saved. I see the list of descriptors selected and the answers that I provided. And I can add it, I can change, I can then save, or I can just leave it as it is and go back. So this is how the part on scenarios work in the thematic modules. As I mentioned, in each thematic module, there is also the section on planning and evaluating an educational activity. And this is with a similar structure for every thematic module, but of course with a different content, because each module has a different topic, and in each module you can find a selection of suggested educational activities from which you can build the ideas to experiment with this section. So if you want to start a section, because you can do this several times, you can do different activities with different types of focus. You need to start a new planning session when we didn't have one, and for each planning session you need to provide a name. So this is my first session, and of course the name needs to be meaningful, related to the content, to what you want to develop, but here I put it just like that. And then I have the name. I select again some of the descriptors. So let's see, from this one I select this, this, and this. Okay, I save the descriptors. Then I go for responsibility 1 descriptor. I save, and let's see, 2 competencies, it looks fine. 3 and 1, I save the descriptors in the database. It all looks fine, it's here, I can see that. I will then answer some of the questions. Maybe I'm not ready to answer all, just 1 or 2 that I will do later. Then I will save this, and I can see that my first session is saved here. Now, when I go out completely, or I go to some other parts of the tool and then come back, I think I was here, I should normally see my first session here, and I have the option to go to my first session and see what I selected and what I saved, and I can add more answers to some other questions that I'm now ready to do, and I save it. Or I can go and start a new process where I do a different activity, and where I give another title, second session here, and I select completely different descriptors from different competencies, and let's say 2 from here I save, and 1 from here will be necessary, and then I save again. I'm happy with that. I view the descriptors, I save them, I can visualize the descriptor selected, then I can continue to answer the questions. And then, of course, I need to save again to memorize everything in the section. So now I can see I have two sessions of planning and evaluating from this for this thematic module, and I can add more or I can edit those that I have. So this is basically how the most important elements of the tool work. And of course, for those who are piloting, it's extremely important to use the feedback questionnaires that you can find at the end of each thematic module. They are also available here in the user review section in the menu for each account in the left menu. And you have also this sort of logbook where you can add comments as you use the different sections. If you have ideas, you can take notes here, and this will serve for your feedback later on. You normally are expected to to input the data in the feedback questionnaire once you have finalized a module. But as you go with it, you may have ideas or questions or comments that you may want to store here, and if you click save, they are saved, and every time you return, this is something that you can access the notes. And of course, the content of this section, the review section, plus the content of the feedback provided through the questionnaire will be visible to the team that is developing the framework, but the other content will not be, I mean, the comments that you make for the specific activities will remain confidential to you and will not be disclosed. So this is basically also the feedback part of the tool, and I think it's quite easy and everybody can try the different sections, and we expect them to receive valuable feedback. Thank you very much for your contribution, and I hope I can manage to stop this. Okay.